Yeah, welcome to ThinkTech. We have an interesting show for you to consider today. This is our Point-Counterpoint on public safety in Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidel. I'm the moderator today. This is our inaugural live open forum webinar of Point-Counterpoint, where we hope to have an interactive discussion, even a provocative discussion of an important community issue that affects all of us. It's personal. So we feature a panel, and the panel is 4 people. Steve Alm, Honolulu prosecuting attorney since 2021, a former Hawaii Circuit Court judge and U.S. attorney. Peter Rossegg, ThinkTech host of Two Wheel Revolution, and formerly senior spokesman with Hawaiian Electric. Stephanie Dalton, a third panelist, is not here, not able to join us today. And of course, Vicky Caetano, contributor to the ThinkTech American Issues series, a businesswoman and First Lady of Hawaii from 1997 to 2002, candidate for governor in 2022. So see thinktechhawaii.com and our various for our various email advisories, program listings. You should subscribe there and you can get all of our program listings. So the question is it safe? Just like the Marathon Man featuring Dustin Hoffman, and Laurence Olivier as the Nazi dentist, remember that? And William Devane as the CIA person. And wow, that was a fantastic movie. And the question there was, is it safe? Is it safe in Hawaii? And was it safer before? Is it safe on the highways and the bike lanes? Is it safe in the face of widespread use of drugs, including new drugs all the time? Does it get safer if we all have more guns? And how are the police and the justice system and our honorable prosecutor, are they doing a good job? Are they making it safe? All for the good old days. It just seems to me that, there's a nostalgia here. There was a time when aloha was pervasive and it was safe, for sure. Nobody would argue that. Are the police able to handle the sea changes? Are the courts able to handle the sea changes? We read about violence every day, including hate crime violence, not only on the mainland, but right here in Hawaii. Unbelievable. We worry about disaffected people who have no resources, no guardrails. We see the social, wealth, and homeless divides and the resultant resentment. We see TV and movies evolve into crime, anger, vengeance, and violence, every day. What effect does that have on people? What effect does that have on our kids? Will our sense of community in Hawaii today hold up? Will our social, legal, medical, and philanthropic institutions hold up in the face of these sea changes? Can this get better or could it get worse? What do we need to do to make our communities and lives safer? So there are 4 principal areas of inquiry: highways and other infrastructure, drugs, alcohol, mental health, guns and other weapons and attitudes, the police and the justice system. So we're going to go around the table now and get the general views, top of mind concerns about these things from our panelists. Let's start with you, Peter. Peter Rossegg, what are your concerns top of mind about public safety in Hawaii?
Well, Jay, thank you. And thank you, Vicky and Steve. It's good to be here. I'll try not to call Steve Robbie because I know his brother so well from Hawaiian Electric days, but I'm very glad to be here. And as the host of the Two Wheel Revolution, which is about bicycling and e-bikes and e-scooters and e-skateboards and all the rest, traffic safety and the safety of pedestrians is probably my top of mind issue. I don't have the statistics to prove it, but I think most of us here on Oahu are in greater danger from traffic accidents than from the kind of violent crime that you read about in the newspaper or see on television. I'm sure others will have a different point of view on that. But that's a very big issue for me and all the people who are trying to get out of their cars and use alternative transportation. The other thing for me is concealed carry. I'm frankly I'm confused. I'm mystified. The Supreme Court has, in their illegitimacy, 6 members of the Supreme Court has thrown us a curveball, and there's going to be a lot more concealed carry, and if it's legal to conceal carry, there'll be even more illegal concealed carry. What are my rights as a citizen? What are their rights and responsibilities? I think we're going to see a lot more guns out in our community, and they may say concealed carry, but they're not going to be very well hidden. And that scares me more than, I go to Chinatown all the time. I'm a big guy. I'm not too worried about it, but people in places that I go carrying, quote, concealed weapons scares me. Those are my two big issues, Jane.
Wow. Okay. We have miles to go here. Okay, Vicky, your top of mind concerns about public safety in Hawaii.
Well, for me, there are three issues. One, as a grandmother, I never thought I would have to worry about my kids going to school and whether school is a safe space anymore. And yet that's what America has come to. And I do think about safety in our schools, public and private, and worry about my grandchildren and wondering if they'll come back safe every day, every night. It's not even something we can take for granted anymore. Safety in our public areas, another thing, parks, safe neighborhoods. I mean, when we read about two women who are gardening, at the end of the day, daylight's still there in a relatively safe neighborhood, being assaulted. I mean, what is it? What has it come to? Where is it safe in Hawaii? Two women just doing gardening, and what happens there? And the third thing I'm concerned about are visitors, many of whom have to save a lot of money to come out here, and wondering whether a neighbor island, where it looks safe, the Aloha State, can they really be assured of their safety when they're here? Or are they going to be attacked when they're in Waikiki, or, as I said, any of the neighbor islands? I was astonished to hear that crime is not as safe as we think, whether it's on Maui or even in Little Hilo. And so those are the things that I'm concerned about in our community.
Wow. Steve, we really are interested in hearing what's top of mind for you. After all, Steve, this is your job, Steve.
Yeah. And my number one job is to try to keep people as safe as possible. And first it's restoring trust to the prosecutor's office, because that's taken a number of very visible hits. But I'm also a believer in data and research and looking at what the actual numbers are, because anecdote drives a lot of criminal justice decisions over the years, and that's not the right way to do it. So we are almost always in the bottom 10 nationally for violent crime. We are in the top 5 for property crime. We have a big methamphetamine problem. That's part of it. We have been really low on fentanyl and overdoses with Vicodins and that kind of thing. But the numbers are starting to creep up, and that is scary. But I think part of the challenge is that during the pandemic, crime was down about 30%. And it makes sense because stores were closed, you don't have as much shoplifting, that type of stuff. People were home, maybe not as many burglaries. But with the opening of society again, those numbers are up. And we just feel less safe. There's no question about it. And that's why we're doing places in some of the hottest spots like Weed and Seed in Chinatown and like Safe and Sound Waikiki, because those places are economic engines, but they're also very visible. But at the same time, it's very local communities. We're doing Weed and Seed in Waipahu and in Ewa Ewa Beach. But as I tell people, there have been some very violent crimes in Waikiki, but it's not much comfort. There have always been very violent crimes in Waikiki. I remember when I started at the prosecutor's office the first time, there was a case where a woman in a bar went up and patted a guy's blow-up Godzilla doll, and he literally stomped her to death. First in the bar, and then she crawled out onto the sidewalk in Waikiki, and he stomped her to death. It was horrific. Peter Carlisle ended up doing the case. I think the guy got convicted of manslaughter. But we got to look at the data, we got to look at research, and we got to do our very best to keep people safe.
By the way, I want to volunteer to be on the jury for that kind of case. I'm making a public statement of volunteer here. Let's track on some of those things. Let's talk about, for example, Fort Street Mall. Developers would like to, build stuff on the Fort Street Mall, but everybody's concerned that the Fort Street Mall ain't what it used to be. Downtown has changed. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times today about how downtowns all over the country have changed. Companies that used to take, 10,000 feet of space are taking 2,000 feet of space. And people are working at home or not working in offices anyway because of the technology. Result is that the streets are abandoned. The Fort Street Mall has plenty of people you don't want to know. And so it becomes dangerous to take a promenade on the Fort Street Mall and dangerous for somebody to live on the Fort Street Mall. What are we going to do about recovering our downtown? Right now, we've kind of given it away.
Well, Jay, let's get perspective on this too. Downtown looks a lot better today than it did in the summer of 2021. And there were homeless people lining River Street. They were all over. And there have been more than 600 arrests as part of Weed and Seed in the last year and a half. And we did Weed and Seed there before and cut crime by 70%. We knew the homeless situation was much worse now. So when we started it again a year and a half ago, we knew that was a big problem. But there have been more than 140 homeless people arrested for drug possession who are no longer in Waikiki. That was still a felony here. And we started a program called SUDAFAST, Substance Use Disorder Assessment Fast. So when a homeless person gets arrested for drug possession, they go to OCCC. We're trying to get them into treatment. So we have the Department of Health, the public defenders, the treatment providers, so they get assessed right at the beginning and then get placed into one of the treatment programs. Because in order for a homeless person to stay off the street, they're going to have to deal with the mental health and drug and alcohol issues. And Fort Street Mall, there are some shady characters. There's some people living tough times, especially by the bus stop, the most visible part of it on Hotel Street. But the rest of, Fort Street Mall is a lot better than it used to be. I got a letter from Reverend, Bishop Silva talking about how parishioners were able to go back to Our Lady of Peace Cathedral. So it's not perfect, but it is better than it used to be. And we'll keep working with the city and the mayor and all the treatment programs and others to try to make it as safe as it can be.
Steve, maybe this if this is true, but I was just the other day told that Fort Street Mall has been declared a public park in order to allow it to be closed at night. And because it's a public park, you can't have restaurants with seating outside. But it would seem to me that if you took the stretch up from Hotel Street to, say, King Street or going the other direction, and you you encouraged and allowed restaurants to have seating outside, after midnight, I won't speak for it, but it could be a lovely promenade with the outside seating and outside dining that we always, or many of us, think there ought to be more of here in Honolulu, and there was more of during the pandemic. But that we're in this kind of a bind. So I don't know if that's true, but if it is, it seems to me that the giving some kind of a rent and tax discount to restaurants that were willing to come and open up there and put their tables out on the street could really turn that area around.
Yeah, footnote, Peter, is there's a bill in the ledge. I'm not sure of its status that would declare certain areas of the city as creative areas for creative businesses. And this is ostensibly to help the creative industry sector, if you will, and tourism for that matter, and all of us. And the same thing could happen, not only in the Fort Street Mall, but in other areas where we want to have greater control, make them parks.
Well, the city, I think it's a great idea, Peter, but the city has allowed it. So restaurants like FET do have outside seating. It was very successful during the pandemic, and now they're able to do it again. The more of that, the merrier. I think that's a really good idea. I had not heard the park issue, but whatever's going to help that area and getting people outside and eating, it really is an attractive area. And I think Hawaii Pacific University is going to start doing some of their classes again on Fort Street Mall, which will bring a bunch of students into the area, and that can only be a good thing.
Vicki, let me explore with you, the correlations How do you feel about the correlations between the homeless and poverty and disaffection that results from that, as well as the correlation between homelessness and drugs, and the correlation between both of those and crime and violent attacks and robberies and the like, even in broad daylight?
So actually, that's what I wanted to ask Steve, because first of all, I really want to applaud this administration, you, Steve, for seeing that some of these crimes, drug related, what they need is treatment and not, incarceration necessarily. So I applaud that. But with that said, we also know that drug treatment is not something that can be fixed. Drug problems can't be fixed overnight. Do you think that we have the bandwidth, the support, the personnel to do this on a long-term basis, especially as these programs are expanded to take in more of these people who commit these crimes and who have drug issues? The second question I have to you, Steve, is if someone who is homeless with obvious issues but has not committed a crime, is it correct to say that they would be left alone until a crime has been committed? Is there any way that there's a program to encourage them to seek treatment or to counsel them before something negative happens?
Okay, there are efforts out there right now. City is doing the core program with the old ambulances. Health and harm reduction is trying to talk to people, mental health, Kokua. But one of the things that I think is going to be really helpful is there's something called the ACT program, the Assisted Community Treatment, where if a person is a danger to themselves or others, and somebody lying in their own waste is a danger to themselves, a petition can be done in court, and then the person can be forced to take medication or to get treatment. And it's being used on the mainland. Connie Mitchell is doing yeoman's work on that right now. I just came back from Miami with members of the judiciary, public defenders, Department of Health. There's a great program in Miami where homeless people that are serious mentally ill are brought to court, but then diverted into a whole system where they have housing, where they're getting treatment, and getting help. They have peer folks to help it. The new center just opened up. There's a podiatrist because every homeless person has real problems with their feet. There's a dentist. And so we're going to try that on a basis. But to answer your first question, I've talked to as many people as I can, including Josh Green's folks and Josh Green and the mayor. We need hundreds of more beds for mental health and drugs and alcohol. But the one area that's really falling down that could really help is the judiciary, for some reason, is abandoning the proven hope probation model, where we have research showing people in hope compared to those in regular probation use drugs 72% less often. Women fail at probation and go to prison 50% less often. Native Hawaiians, it's 42% less often. And the judiciary hasn't said why. They're just abandoning it. There are 2,500 people in hope before, now there are 500. And it relies on quick consequences. People have to work a little harder, but that is not an excuse. I supervised 2,000 felony defendants in hope when I was a judge and left the bench. We need programs like that to help them stay sober. Because if you help a homeless person go to treatment, when they get out, they have to be monitored. And as one of the guys who testified at the legislature hearing recently said, knowing you're going to go to jail for using even for 2 days helps them not to use. He referred to the regular probation system as, as you baby them, then you bury them. No consequence, no consequence, no consequence, 5 years in prison. So we've talked to the judiciary about this. I've talked to Chief Justice Reckenwald. They never give an answer. They just say, we want to give the probation officers more discretion. We're really losing out, and I hope we don't have to wait for a new Chief Justice to get them back on track.
So what do we do? Who do we write to? Who do we call?
Chief Justice Reckenwald.
You want me to send a letter?
Yes, by all means. And just say, look at the research, look at the data. We have Pepperdine and UCLA did randomized control trial studies. There's no question it's so far superior to regular probation.
What is their reason for this?
They have not given us a reason. We don't know if there's no judge volunteering to do this. I had 30 hearings a day, 4 days a week, but I got to know the defendants and they knew I cared about them, but I'd hold them accountable. It's really inexplicable. The public defender and I wrote a letter to Chief Justice Recknewald a year ago saying, please go back to hope the way it was done, especially these days when they're trying to reduce the number of people going to prison. And I can't think of a program that's going to send, a crisis that will send people to poverty faster than mom or dad going to prison. We met with Governor Lingo's group and we told him, we support all of your efforts. We support women's court, everything else, but it's all going to be completely undermined unless the judiciary starts holding people accountable in hope and encouraging them. It's a two-step process. You're encouraging them to succeed, but it's like parenting. If your kid does something wrong, you do something about it immediately, and then they pair a bad choice with the consequence. That's not happening anymore.
That's terrible. But
It
you know,
is
one thing that I think some of our listeners would have this question. We've had drugs for a long time, and it's getting worse. And there are new drugs, modern technology, what have you, and you can manufacture. You don't even have to import into the state. And more, people have more access to more drugs, and those drugs are devastating. Okay, and the problem is, and that leads to homelessness, and it leads to all kinds of trouble. And we have program after program after program. I can sit here and tell you 3 or 4 programs that I'm aware of that have attempted to deal with this. And every time you turn around, somebody has a new program. And I query whether these programs are on some kind of continuum where we learn from one, we improve in the next, we refine in the third, and so forth. Or are we just reinventing new programs like the flavor of the day? Because we really have to deal with this, and it can't be, one program replaces another program, and then another program comes along and replaces that.
Now we have a lot of good programs that have been there for years. They need a steady source of funding, and they will expand. Hinamauka, Poilani, Salvation Army ATS, Habilitat, Sand Island, Ho'omaukiola. We've got the programs in place. They need a steady source of funding, and they help people on a regular basis. Not everybody, maybe 20 or 30% will stay clean after leaving residential treatment that way. But maybe we send them again, but monitor them in court so they can be held accountable. People have a wrong idea. Drug testing is not done to catch people. It's to help keep them sober. Because they can tell their friend, hey, I'm not going to get high with you. I'm going to get drug tested tomorrow. Judge Alms, with an S, is going to send me back to jail again, even if it's for a couple of days. There's a famous philosopher, Beccaria, in the 1700s, who said, certainty, swiftness is much more important than severity of punishment to shape behavior. And it's absolutely true. And when you set up a strategy to do that, then let's keep it up and support those good programs, because they have been helping people and can continue in the future, and they need to grow.
The short-term view of a lot of people is get them off the street, get them away from me. I don't want them in front of my house. I don't want them on my block. I don't want them in my neighborhood. And if that means sending them to jail, send them to jail. And I know that's short-sighted, and it's not the liberal view, but a lot of people feel that way. And I think we have to deal with that by, solving the problem and also publicizing, what we are doing to get people to have trust again in these programs. But Vicki, you're aware of the, what do you want to call it, the philanthropic world in Hawaii. Why doesn't the philanthropic world give more money to these programs? Wouldn't that help? If we rely on the legislature, that's a political sine curve, if you will. But if it's the philanthropic world where people are, they're understanding and they study this and they write checks. And if they write more checks, just like Steve says, we'll have better results, no?
Yes, but remember, Jay, for philanthropists who want to support this, so much of what we're doing here for this particular area, it is interwoven too with the laws of what we can do, what we cannot do. Can you forcibly bring someone in for treatment when they oppose it, when they say they're fine? Many of these people who are into drugs are always in a world of denial and everything is fine. So it does have to marry with what the legislature is doing. You cannot go off and like the Wild Wild West and just go out there and pull everyone off the streets. I think many people would like to do that, but you can't do that. And that is a challenge. And you're right, though. We need to marry that together because, as Steve has pointed out, so many nonprofit organizations are already out there doing the good work, but they're not getting the kind of constant, dependable funding that they need. There's just such a disconnect, I think, in terms of getting things done and tackling this problem. But I would also say that swiftness is really key with any kind of problem. And one of the challenges I think in Hawaii is we take far too long to get things done. I mean, you want to go to another subject, this student who was hit by this person, and you find out later that he had 164 previous citations. 164 violations. How was he even allowed to have a driver's license and to be driving in the first place? So this is an issue, I think, in our state that we take too long to address these issues or to fix them. And I'm very grateful that in the prosecutor's office, we have Steve Ohm, because I think that he understands this, that you understand that urgency. But so many times when you talk to attorneys, they are always concerned about the rights of one individual over what it can do to the majority, and that is the challenge that we face. Too little, too late. We need to move with more urgency if we're going to tackle these problems.
I just had somebody on my show whose sister was killed 10 years ago at almost the same spot that young student was killed and the other was badly injured. And he is an advocate for safer streets. And he made the point that as much as we're all indignant about the fact that the driver here had so many violations, didn't have a license and so forth, he said the main issue is really that the infrastructure there, that the trees cover the lights, the street lights, that it's kind of an open freeway. There's too much traffic that's uncontrolled in that area and many others. And, I think we can I'm just as indignant about this guy driving around and why there isn't he doesn't have an accelerometer on his ankle that would show him in a vehicle of any kind that he could be monitored, because he shouldn't be in anything except for a bus. But I think we do get, and we watch the news and we get hepped up about, not the data, but the individual anecdotes and the individual stories that are so awful. And frankly, the politicians respond to that anger when I think we should be going the other way. I think we should be decriminalizing more of drug use. We should have more social workers and forgive me, fewer police officers. The prison system's is the most expensive alternative, and it's already overcrowded. The judiciary is expensive to run and should be devoted to the really serious violent crimes. The prosecutor's office shouldn't be diverted on small drug issues when there's so much else that they could be doing. And we should have, social workers. And I don't know why the HOPE program has to be run by a judge. There must be some way to have it run by a social worker, a trained, person who can be the arbiter of saying you qualify for HOPE and you don't. We tend to want to have the political system solve it through laws and then criminalize things when we really should be going in the other direction. That's my counterpoint.
Well, let me go on to one point you mentioned. We have a bill in the ledge right now that would legalize recreational marijuana. And I'd like to know how the panel feels about that. How do you feel about it, Peter? How do you feel about it, Vicki? How do you feel about it, Steve? Some people think it's a gateway drug and it's going to lead to more problems than happy recreation.
Well, I'll go first, if I may. There is so much illegal recreational marijuana use that I don't really know how much worse if it's worse. It could be if it was not illegal. It would certainly, in most, all the evidence to me seems to show that the marijuana use is not the big danger. It doesn't, turn you into the rabid, drooling criminal that we used to see in the movies that warned us. It's almost simply a recognition of the reality that's out there. And let's get that off the table. Let's be devoting our efforts to fentanyl. Let's be devoting our efforts to really dangerous stuff. That's my opinion.
Okay, Vicky, your thoughts?
Well, that's my counterpoint. I'm not in agreement with that. And I think it's very dangerous to decriminalize and make recreational. I support medicinal marijuana, but not recreational. And I as an employer, I will tell you, sorry, Pete, but I disagree, because I see, especially in transportation, can you imagine if a driver is allowed to do that? I mean, we're sending really conflicting messages to people. We're on this, all spending tons of money to get people to stop smoking cigarettes, when the danger is more to themselves, really. But now we're wanting to introduce and approve recreational marijuana. I've seen that, what it does to people. And while they may not go stir crazy, it definitely has an effect in terms of their attention ability. And I would not want a pilot going on a plane and having smoking marijuana before. And I wouldn't want someone behind the wheel and having had marijuana.
I think we should then outlaw recreational alcohol, because, I don't want my pilot using either one, alcohol or marijuana.
That's why we have the alcohol content.
Okay, we're gonna leave this to Steve for the final word on the issue.
Yeah, let's
Steve,
go.
how do
Let's
you feel about
get the guy who's got something in the game here.
Yeah, I'm with Vicky on this one. And part of the challenge is, for most adults, this is a recreational thing. But what's lost in the story always is the weed that's out there today is not what we all heard about, knew about, whatever, in high school. There was 2 to 3% THC. Now on, like in dispensaries, and that's weed stores in Colorado, it's about 30%. And the concentrates go up to 90. And they sell it with that idea. One of the sales in Colorado is, they're called Girl Scout cookies. That's the name of it. We'd be sending a message to our kids. This is fine. Yes, we don't want you using it, but society said it's great. Right now, there are a lot of kids going to the emergency rooms because they think they're going crazy because it is so strong. That's just the facts. And so we've been, we're trying to learn from Washington State, from Oregon, from Colorado. And the folks in Colorado said, frankly, your city will never look the same. In Denver now, there are more weed stores than there are McDonald's and Starbucks combined. Waikiki will be every other corner, and I think what you said earlier, Peter, anybody who wants to get weed now can get it. So this is kind of fixing something that's not a problem. I agree with the medicinal marijuana. When I was a judge, I'd rather have somebody, if weed helps them, with an old motorcycle accident injury, that's a lot better than Vicodins, OxyContin, oxycodone. I realize it's a difficult area. We're just hoping, let's wait a couple more years, see how these other states do. They do have increased traffic collisions. Proving causation is always a real challenge, right? As opposed to a correlation. But that's what our recommendation is. Let's just watch a little bit more and see what we can do. One of the challenges, speaking to what Vicky and Peter just said, is there's no reliable test right now to get a level of THC like in a driver's, bloodstream. You can do it with alcohol, so we can do DUIs, but they can't do that. And depending on how much, if people smoke a lot, it's going to be in their system for 30 days. You can outlaw it in certain professions, and believe me, they really watch airline pilots closely about the alcohol, and they won't let them fly. They test them, all the rest of it. But this is a really good issue, difficult issue. And I think a lot of people just think, what's the harm? but a lot of it, they're thinking back to weed that had 2 or 3% potency, not 30%. So.
Yeah, well, you
And
know,
let's be honest, Pete. What's behind this, honestly, is not just about people saying it's time to decriminalize it. No, what's behind it is money. Follow the money. That is what's behind this push. That's the honest truth.
Of course
Well,
it is. It's capitalism. It's the American system. Everything, it all gets back to money in terms of that. But how can you ever hope to control the potency if you make it illegal? If you can legalize it, you could control and you could monitor potency. It would be a big deal. I know it would involve a lot of governmental involvement, but it's done with alcohol, and the sales of alcohol are monitored, and the strength of alcohol is monitored. And to me, this is still just another example of that. No doubt, you can always point to instances where it's going to have some bad effect, but it's basically it's recreational alcohol in a different form, already being used widely. So I respectfully stick to my counterpoint.
Okay, I'd like to add something, that when medicinal marijuana was passed, the public conversation involved, we're going to take a look at the data that comes out of this. We're gonna very carefully examine how this will work before we address recreational marijuana. And it seems clear to me that we really don't have the data, especially with this sea change of more concentrated marijuana oils and the like that Steve's talking about. So maybe it's a matter of getting more data to figure out exactly how this is working. Steve,
you're absolutely right, Jay. And there are two things that address that. The legislature last session had, I think, a dual use committee, and they're recommending waiting until certain things are put in place. And then Paul Brubaker was hired by the local cannabis industry to evaluate how has the regulation been going. And he really said it is a total failure of the Department of Health to monitor this over the last year. Now, of course, I don't agree with his conclusion. Let's get rid of all regulation. But you're right, Jay. It's really hard to monitor this. And the bill we saw in the legislature doesn't mention anything about what Peter was talking about with potency. And it would let folks advertise however they want to. And to Vicky's point, Big Tobacco is the one looking at this all over the country. And Philip Morris, those folks, they're going to be the ones, because they know how to grow plants and roll them into cigarettes and sell them. So that it's not going to be a little mom and pop stuff. It's going to be run by Big Tobacco.
Hey, we've had 30 years of glorification of weed, going back to maybe 40, going back to Arlo Guthrie and Alice's Restaurant. You guys old enough to remember that? And I guess what I take away from this is that Arlo may not have been right in current times. Let's move to some questions. I have some questions I think need to be answered. One question is to Steve: what percentage of crime in Hawaii and Oahu is drug related? More specifically, what is the recidivism percentage for defendants who successfully complete the Hope probation, and over what period of time? Can you answer that?
One of the things we've discovered is there's some people that just steal constantly, like go into 7-Elevens, they go into ABC stores every day, multiple places, over and over. So we're using what's called the Habitual Property Offender Act that can elevate that to a felony. And almost everybody who's been busted on that in the last 6 months has a drug or alcohol problem. The first guy, Lawrence Smalls, had 161 convictions in district court, petty misdemeanors. He would go into an ABC store, grab a bottle of vodka, and leave.
Nobody wanted to challenge him.
Exactly.
The clerk there is not going to stop him from leaving.
Exactly. And the clerks don't want to fight the owner's liability, but he knows that. And so he's in jail right now. There's a mandatory year, but he needs to get help for his alcohol problem, or he's never going to stop stealing. Now, that he is the typical person. Now, at the other end of the scale, there's a woman named Yolanda. She would go into Ulta makeup stores, Target, and fill up her cart because she knows they're not going to stop her. I mean, the loss prevention officer will see her come in and say, Yolanda, get out of here, leave. And she'd say, you can't stop me. You can't do anything. She out at the a Target in Kailua. She did that, and she had a mask on, but they still recognized her. And she filled up her cart with macadamia nuts, and then turned it around, went outside, past all the cash registers, put it in her Lexus, and drove away. So she is somebody, is $660 worth of macadamia nuts. We're going to try to send her to prison because she just sells it all to a fence. So she's at OCCC now. A detective is putting together all these other cases. I think there are 12 or 15 other felony cases to go along with the felony habitual property offender. So
Hey, I'm a volunteer, Steve.
yeah, well, very good. They don't accept volunteer jurors because they're too motivated.
At least, Steve, guaranteed life employment for you. Got to say, bad guys like that. When I lived in Waimanalo a long time ago, there was a family that was known professionally as the people who broke into cars at the tourist center. That's just what the family did. And everybody kind of knew it, including, I imagine, the cops. But there are bad people out there. There's no question.
Yeah,
We got some other questions, you guys. I'd like to get to them. We don't have that much time left. One question I think is interesting, and again, it falls on Steve, but I would certainly like to hear from Vicki and Peter about it. What is happening with cashless bail, and is it having an impact on crime rates? Could it have an impact on crime rates?
Well, I'll try to be brief. I think the whole bail system needs to be reformed because the current system where you have to put up cash, it does discriminate against the poor. But from a prosecutor's standpoint, if you make bail, you're not supervised at all. You're not drug tested. You don't have to see a probation officer. You could have the worst ice problem in the world and just carry on if you can put up the couple $1,000 bail for like a burglary. So if we could get a system to get people in front of a judge right away and then monitor them pre-trial. We did a version of Hope in pre-trial, and Steve Raphael, this heavyweight researcher from Berkeley, he did a study of it. And in the pretrial context, they're waiting for their trial. The guys in the whole pretrial test got arrested for new crimes 40% less often. I mean, it's a way, if you monitor them and you encourage them, you can help correct them. But this is going to take a big effort. We're going to try to get involved. I have some ideas. We're going to work with the police. We're going to work with the legislators about replacing the whole system. So when people get arrested, they get in front of a judge right away, and we can make the right decision as to their bail status.
Well, thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of questions now. We only have a few minutes left, and I want to cover a couple of other. Oh, Vicki, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask Steve. Steve, why couldn't the bail system be changed to where it's based on the crime that you've committed versus the individual? So, for example, lesser offenses would not require bail, regardless of who the individual is, what their financial capacity is, and crimes of a more violent nature should have no bail, regardless of whether they're able to put up the money or not. Why couldn't it be based on that versus the individual's ability to make bail?
Well, I think in large part it is based on that, although the system isn't honest enough. If you're charged with murder, it's going to be $1 million bail, which might as well be no bail. But at the bottom end of the scale, often those folks are released. And when they're brought to court, they're released. The problem is they're not going to come back. And one of the things is if they're arrested, say a guy who's arrested in Chinatown for a crime, he spends one night at the police station, cell block, he goes to court the next morning and pleads guilty. Typically, he's just allowed to leave, credit for time served, not put on probation. So there's no even chance to do mental health treatment. There's no even chance to do that. We were talking to Tommy Waters the other day, the chair, and he's got some ideas coming up with some money. We'll see if we can set up some stuff pre-trial so we can even divert people out of the system. We're looking to working with all the partners to do that.
Thank
There's
you.
some dynamic there. Peter, I would like to talk to you about the highways and the byways. You have a traffic accident back in 1960, so you settled it. Now you have a traffic accident. There's a fair chance you're going to get prosecuted, and you're going to go to jail. And also, there are people who walk across the street who are drunk, who are on drugs, and get right in the middle of the lane where you do hurt them, and completely unintentionally, and yet your life is also affected. And then you have the hit and run cases. You have the rage cases. The highways ain't what they used to be. There was a policeman on the freeway. He was trying to help somebody, and somebody came driving along much too fast and killed him a few years ago. This resulted in a bill and a ledge. Query, are the highways as safe as they could be for cars and for bicycles?
No, they obviously are not safe as they could be. There's always the accident that you couldn't plan for. But I'm very glad, for example, to see these speed humps that are going in various places on the poly, which I use a lot. There are now speed bumps. And every time I go over them, I say, damn. But every time I get after that, I think, good, we're slowing down. Bike lanes, I know they aggravate the hell out of some people, and I come to make a left turn off King Street and I swear under my breath. And then I think, if everybody has to slow down a little bit for this damn bike lane, what's going to be hurt? And my guest is, he said, we need more lights, and we need more on Capulani, where we've had these deaths, his sister 10 years ago. The infrastructure is made for cars, and the infrastructure is made to let cars go as fast as they possibly can. And no driver wants to kill somebody, but we're all in this little speed thing. Let's slow down. I mean, we could also use a lot.
What about the automated ticket machines on speed?
Until I get one, I'm for it.
And on traffic signals.
I think until I get one, as I say, I'm for it. Until I get caught in the red light thing, I'm in favor of it. And then afterward, I'm going to have to swallow very hard. I think we have let the automobile, a big 3,000-pound thing, usually with one person in it, control our public spaces. And that's wrong. Even if I wasn't an enthusiast for personal mobility, it's wrong to let cars control the world we're living in. And there are many things. They're the traffic smoothers and roundabouts and these humps. There are a lot of things we could do. It'll take us 10 minutes longer to get from downtown to Waikiki, and so what?
Vicki, isn't it a matter of design? Can't we design our roads? I'm thinking of the Poly Highway, okay, where they have all these, speed bumps and signs, a lot of signs, watch out for the pedestrians, but there are no lights. I mean, lights that light up the walkway. And so I guess that costs too much money. And of course, it leads to the whole dichotomy between state highways and county highways, which I think is not rational. Can't we design our roads so they're safer? Why don't we do that? And lives will be saved, don't you think?
Absolutely. There's no reason why we can't do a better job of that. And, the reason people are in such a hurry, let's face it, it's because traffic has gotten so bad. I mean, have you ever sat under traffic 90 minutes just to get to West Oahu? And so timing of the lights needs to be addressed, traffic situation. There's so many other things that could be done so that people don't have to be cramming too much into the day, trying to get from the house to work, get the kids to school. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. It's not to excuse speeding in any way, but I think we really need to, as you say, look at our overall system. And I swear the lighting on the traffic lights are off because it's just not synchronized properly. And I think that adds to traffic backing up. It doesn't seem so complicated, but I wish someone would look at that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And people have been calling for that for years, back to the day of Panos Primaduros, if you remember, the traffic engineer at UH. And we haven't done it. The lights are not synchronized. So, but you really need to weigh in on this, Steve. Can you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree totally with the speed humps. When we did Weed and Seed in China and Kalipalama the first time, we asked the community, what are the big problems? And they talked about the drug dealers on Pool Lane and stuff. But they also said people speed up and down Pool Lane to get between King Street and Vineyard. And we're not going to let our kids play outside. They chase a ball into the street and get run over. So we asked the city council, and in what must be a record, 2 weeks later, speed humps were put on Pool Lane, and they're there to this day. That's really smart. And I would disagree with Vicky on one point. When I live in Kaimuki, and if I'm running a little bit later, 7 o'clock on in the morning, Kapiolani is I shouldn't say this, and more people do it. Kapiolani is a really good alternative. And the lights are fairly well synchronized. You've got the beautiful trees overhead, but you can go down Kapiolani, and there are a lot of those are synchronized, but design should be a big part of that. And I think that, to Peter's point, where those girls are run over on Kapiolani, I think DOT is looking at raised sidewalks. They're looking at other things to make the area safer and be smart about it.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay,
It's unfortunate it took a death like that.
We're actually out of time, and we haven't covered one thing, and I'll just put it under the rubric that sovereignty never looked so good. What I mean is, we get drugs from outside the country. Matter of fact, one caller left this question. This caller is a retired judge. Why can't we simply do a better job at keeping illegal drugs from coming into Hawaii? And the corollary to that is, why can't we prevent guns from being here, coming in here? And then, of course, because of the Supreme Court, we have people who will advocate and lobby for, open carry and the like, consistent with the Supreme Court's latest erroneous ruling. And so we have outside influences, that are very troubling in both guns, and drugs. And if only we could, keep those things out of here. We were happy before. Couldn't we be happy again? Sovereignty never looked so good. So I'm just saying that because I would like you guys to cover it in your final remarks. You each have 2 minutes to make a final remark. Let's begin with Peter.
Well, the illegitimacy of the Supreme Court could fill the next half hour as far as I'm concerned. I don't think, I'm not sure how, if you weigh the pluses and minuses of this sovereignty, whether we would come out, how we would come out. But, for sure, when we are being buffeted by 6 people sitting in Washington in their well-protected worlds, there's something wrong with that. I don't think we'll keep drugs out because, as you said, the drugs can be produced locally. I think overall, belonging to the United States is probably more positive than negative. But for sure, it'd be nice if we could separate ourselves from some of the craziness that is going on there in the government and in a lot of other places. That's it.
Oh, okay, Vicky, you're next. Can you give us your final thoughts and takeaway about this discussion?
Well, thank you. It's been a great discussion. I've enjoyed it. I would like to focus my comments on just one subject that we didn't really have a chance to touch base on, and that is to talk about those who are already in the prison system, those who are incarcerated. I think we really need to do a better job of transitioning them so that when they come out back into the community, they are so much better prepared to be part of our community again, and to cut the recidivism of people returning back like a revolving door back into the prison system. We cannot just incarcerate without a plan to rehabilitate.
Absolutely. And that is, we do have prison reform people, who are watching this show. So Steve, you should take a moment and talk about that too. Is the justice system doing its job? What else can we do? What else can we do about the prison system in general? How we handle this lack of safety, how we fix it?
Well, some people, a small amount absolutely need to be locked up to protect the rest of us. But at the time, when they're in prison, they should be getting rehabilitation. I talk to inmates who say they'd rather go to Saguaro in Arizona to do their time, even though they're cut off from their family. That private prison offers classes, vocational, other educational things. They have great Native Hawaiian practices. There's no reason we can't do that here. And I think the Department of Public Safety breaking off into a Department of Law Enforcement, and then the other part, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, sends the right message. I think Tommy Johnson is the director. His head is on straight with that. We got to build a new jail. I think it makes sense to make it pretty big, like OCCC, but be able to, close off wings if we're able to in the future, not have to do it. But they're going to have a diagnostic center. They're going to have places where you separate people. And I think rehabilitation has to be a big part of it. My job, public safety, has got to be number one. But at the same time, we have to try innovative programs. We have to try to divert some of these seriously mentally ill people out of the jail system so they can get treatment on the outside. And I'm going to keep fighting to get the judiciary to monitor probation people better, because there are about 2,200 people in prison, women's prison, Halava, or the mainland. We have about 6,600 on felony probation. They need to do better there. Women almost never go to prison at original sentencing because they don't commit robberies. They don't commit manslaughter or murder as much as men. But they fail at probation more than half the time. That's ridiculous. We have ways to deal with them, and we got to get it done right.
Steve,
At
we're
the
lucky to
bottom,
have
we
you.
have to remain as we were, with aloha for all, caring about the community. Somehow we have to preserve that. We can't let this turn us away from that. I want to say also that there's so much more to talk about. And if anyone out there has other questions or comments they want to make, send them in to us, and we will distribute them around to the panel. And any answers the panel then gives after the program, we'll relay in public. Okay. Thank you so much to our panelists, Steve Alm, Peter Rosick, and Vicky Caetano, and to the people who sent in questions or comments. And thank you to everybody who has attended this program and thus enhanced the public conversation and the public understanding about this important topic. And it's personal among all of us. And I really appreciate you guys engaged with it. Stay tuned for more Point-Counterpoint at noon on the first Saturday of each month. We want to make sure to send notices about programs, and you can get those notices. Sign up on our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and you can get all our email advisories. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I'm really happy we had this conversation. Thanks to you all. Aloha
Jay.
till next time.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.